Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jet, and today we are reading the Philosophical Midwifery book. We are in chapter 2 on the Pathologos. The thing we are on the hunt for, the Pathologos. We just finished the section on with the title of The Struggle Over Discussing the Pathologos. Did we answer all the questions we set out to answer there? What is the struggle? We talked about the stakes, closing the loop, freeing yourself from your problem, doing the activity that's the most important thing to do. So we wondered about, well, could we therefore say this is the meaning of life? Put it in a pamphlet and mail it out to people so everybody knows the meaning of life. We also wondered about that as we read the Meno. If you're reading along with the Meno. But there is an invitation. Welcome to the chat, by the way. There's an invitation to a new kind of relationship that we called mature loving. That as you return home to discuss what you've learned about the Pathologos, if they can't get over their blame game, then they can't partake in this new kind of mature loving relationship that we are returning back with. A relationship that ideally we've developed with ourselves, with our friends, with the community here, based on following the logos, based on understanding what's most significant and meaningful, self. Oh, and of course the implications of, instead of understanding the self, our lives are based on a false belief about a false image of the self. These are the horrible implications that follow, that I have discovered in reflecting upon my life. This is the kind of thing you would say as you go home. Returning the loop, maybe ask some questions about it. Perhaps even discover that a similar thing happened to them in their upbringing, part of a tradition, or they could think this is part of a blame game and just go on the defensive. Or just the introduction of the logos might trigger a counter attack, because we have the possibility of, as we see in the text, exile and hostility. Which are typical counterattack responses to the logos. So there's a risk. We also discover that even though there might be two kinds of responses, one response of realizing this isn't a blame game, it's not about guilt, it's not about assigning wrongness, in fact it's the opposite, that's baby brain, that's pathologos thinking. That keeps us chained to our problem. Instead it's fun, friendly, it's freedom. Yeah, well said in the chat. Yeah, it's freedom to participate in logos, reflection, maturity, without any need to assign wrongness to the essence of the self of another person. Okay. Which is required for blame and guilt. You have to blame someone by assigning an innate wrongness, evil, heathen, criminal, you name it, something, or the specific pathologos that we pick up about ourselves. And if we believe that image, we will feel guilt or shame that may be too much of a burden for us to ignore or carry through in order to participate in the logos. And therefore they may have a negative reaction, like threatening exile, or just a hostile reaction. But even if they are in that group, we saw that they are still benefited, because even in these families, they have learnt something. The ones that reject it. They have been invited to review the way they have cared for those in their charge. They know that in being asked to be accountable for their actions, a new era has begun. With that recognition, they also know that their image as an unquestioned authority has been pierced. Oh, where's my sound effect? There we go. And with that change, things will never return to their former mode of being. So despite the reaction of the other person, it's going to be something beneficial, which is an interesting thing to discover. And then we ask, well, hang on a second, we want to close our loop. We want to be free of our problem. Is that dependent upon their reaction? In other words, is our personal development in the hands of somebody other than ourselves? Strange question, but it's one I have. And right at the beginning, we looked at how it said, circle again. To reveal what one has understood takes courage, because the discussion might be interpreted as assigning blame. That's with the fork in the road. What type of reaction? Is it a type A or type B? Interpreted as assigning blame, that's team B. For bollocks, I don't know, for blocked, let's say. And blame. There is a risk of, therefore, meeting hostility and rejection. In some cases, the risk is worth taking. So, not all cases. That's interesting. Of course, not everyone has the opportunity to literally return back to their parents and discuss these origin scenes that were so formative. But we can do it through role play or surrogates. Sometimes somebody might come up in our lives that is meeting those sort of conditions or functioning in a similar way that will give us an opportunity to speak up in a way that we weren't able to. Close the loop that way. But it says in some cases the risk is worth taking, so maybe it's not worth taking the risk even if those opportunities are available. I don't know. Let's keep it as a question. The effort to establish a new and more profound way of relating with the family is a noble goal. Okay? The effort itself is noble. That's neat. Let's keep reading. Even after a lapse of many years, it may still be significant to discuss the pathologos producing situations with those who were involved in its transmission. And it can be equally significant to try and deal justly with the pathologos manifestations that occur in present family situations. It often happens during these situations that we don't need this anymore. It often happens during those situations that those witnessing it, so a benefit for onlookers, are likely to appreciate seeing that one of their members has matured. Once members of a family understand that these explorations are not an attempt to blame someone. It's come up again. Then it is possible for them to come to see that they too can learn. Ooh, you too can master the ways of the Force. Part of this channel is making philosophy more accessible with amazing metaphors like that. Star Wars. You too can become a Jedi and master the Force. What would be the equivalent? You too can become a philosopher and master the art of the Logos. It is your destiny. That fits. Right, and so what they, so the analogy goes back to them seeing that, again, not blame, but it is possible for them to come to see that they too can learn about the origin of belief. That was a puzzle because this is not just their specific pathologos belief. A bit like that. But belief itself, which is interesting. It is our desire for mature relationships with those we love that draws us to dialogue meaningfully. There's some desire moving us as a soul. Is that what motivates all our actions? What is it? Is it one of many desires? It is a desire for mature relationships with those we love that draws us into dialogue meaningfully with parents and authorities. In philosophical midwifery, we call this a return to one's roots, a return home once again. So, returning the quest again to the quest giver, and then you make that noise. Oh, and you've leveled up, so that noise happens too. I hope the sound effects are going through. For to complete this cycle is to bring to an end the pathologos. That in that victory we become heroes because we now know something about what it takes to become rational. So we have achieved the noble goal of becoming rational. But we are heroes because we haven't just become rational, we know something about what it takes to go through the hero's journey. Which seems to be a metaphor, an analogy for becoming rational. So it's a freedom from our pathologos, false images of ourself, our psychic parasite, that frees us to our natural self-rationality, sharing in the logos, more without any false image in the way. Interesting questions come up. But we have closed the loop, and we've completed what most needed completion. So this is what brought forth the question, if this is what most needs completion, then would we say this is the highest goal and therefore the meaning of life and therefore the pamphlets that we were sending out? Ever wonder what the meaning of life is? Wonder no more. It's this. Closing the loop. And here we see it's our desire for this goal, for mature relationships with those we love, that we also understand will close the loop of our own problem and free us from what we most need to free ourselves from. It's the desire for that that draws us to dialogue meaningfully with our parents and authorities. In midwifery, we call this a return to one's roots and a return home once again, because to complete this cycle is to bring an end to the pathologos. This cycle, it's simply the desire for this relationship. Doesn't say anything about their reaction, or even if you are able to establish this relationship. Which would be great, because then roleplay would work. A genuine desire to establish a meaningful relationship with those we love through a roleplay scenario. No mention of anything else, no mention of the reaction that they needed to have. Is what makes us able to complete the cycle and bring an end to the pathologos. Bring an end to the pathologos. Everything we've seen up until here has been about the significance of putting an end to the pathologos. Is it just the desire? It is the desire for mature relationships with those we love that draws us to dialogue meaningfully with parents and authorities. In philosophical midwifery, we call this a return to one's roots. What a desire for a return home once again. For to complete this cycle is to bring to an end the pathologos. In that victory, we become heroes. So the victory would be ending the pathologos. That's the most important thing. Oh, in a certain way where we go through understanding so we know what it takes to become rational. So the necessity of midwifery, the logos. Yeah, seems to be sufficient for closing the loop. Okay, cool. There is a beauty and a sense of intrinsic correctness to the decision, not the consequence, to re-examine these early pathologo scenes and to discuss them with those who played out their convincing roles within those scenes. In discussions with them, we can discover how these early scenes in our life led to false beliefs about ourselves. Through sharing with them, they can realize the depth and shaping power of the pathologo scenes. For there is no reason why the process cannot be reversed, since passing into the pathologos is like falling asleep, and waking up is to move from the sleepwalking state, pathologos, to the awakened logo. We're waking up to the logos. That's neat. Wow, that's what we're doing. Waking up to the logos. Channel's called Awakening Philosophy. I don't know. Also, Awakening Logos is cool. I couldn't connect. Once families and clans can accept the decisive part they have played, they can then play a more vital role in the development of their own destiny. This is the consequence of the freedom, or the consequence of awakening to the logos, which is also waking up from zombie or sleepwalking state, or somnambulist if you fancy. That's neat. If they accept this challenge and work with all the members of their group, it is inevitable that they will find ways to cultivate a pathologos-free environment. Imagine living in that kind of house. The families who have been successful in this effort have been those who would grasp the idea that guilt or assigning blame plays no role in freeing the family of the destructive nature of the pathologos. Again, repetition of the same. This is the third. Is it the third or fourth time blame has been brought up, and maybe in 3 different kinds of ways? The major hurdle one has to overcome to even accept the invitation to this kind of reflection. Number 2, an internal conflict they will go through as whatever we say, they still might carry this idea of blame internally and be going through a struggle of guilt. That could become too much for some people, I suppose. Thus the need for courage, we would say. And here, the very first thing mentioned about what a good family or a successful family, free family would do is make clear the significance of that very point. It's the hardest thing to overcome to get you into the game, practically and internally, I suppose you could say. So yeah, interesting, because we had a whole big section on guilt and blame just before. Let's keep reading. So, what would they do? As a family who have been successful in this effort to cultivate a pathologos-free environment have been those who could grasp the idea that guilt or assigning blame plays no role. Plays no role in freeing the family of the destructive nature of the pathologos. If this is the most important thing we can do, or maybe tied for number 1, along with discovering the self, although maybe, I don't know, it's up there. 1 or 2, most important thing, let's say 1. We had this debate last time. The most important thing we can do, understand and free ourselves from our pathologos. If we are a good family, we would be creating the conditions to do that. The culture to do that, the way of being of doing that, the language of doing that. And applying everything we learn of the logos to other things that are important, like what would love be with logos? What would love be with understanding? How important is understanding to come along with love? How destructive can tough love be? Again, love that doesn't value the self-logos as the primary goal or path. As a result, they in their turn come to see what they have handed down to their children had been handed down to them. This is where I need. Next time I'm going to get my guitar. In addition, they see that they were just as unaware of what they were doing as their parents had been when they passed it on. They knew what they did, but not why they did it. In truth, they had no realization of its effects nor the purpose of it all. Clearly, those who confront the pathologos as a family gain in many ways. Most importantly, they benefit because the very willingness to enter into these relationships is evidence of the possibility of restructuring relationships. This brings with it the hope that a mature, loving, enhanced by a bond of understanding, there we go, may be possible within the family. So the very willingness to enter into different ways of being, ways of relating, is enough evidence of a possibility of being able to change. That brings with it a hope that a mature, loving, enhanced by logos, understanding may be possible within the family. Cool. However, in other families, we find that when members tried to discuss the things similar to those within their families or with those who had positions of authority, they were met with strong denial and were accused of having betrayed. Betrayed La Familia. Betrayed the family by openly discussing these matters with strangers. In such families, it is very difficult or impossible to explore these matters any further without risking exile and hostility. You risk exile and hostility by trying to discuss further beyond maybe their level of pathologos limitation. Clearly, the fear of having to admit they were wrong. Again, the fear based on blame, guilt. Admit they were wrong in some way carries with it a heavy burden of guilt. There is our guilt. And a sense of worthlessness. Ironically, the pot of gold at the rainbow of the logos we are inviting them into, we are learning to ourselves share in as we read. Its goal, its pot of gold is to understand, recognize, see, and eternally be through, perhaps, self, because of its nobility, because of its highest metaphysical status. The exact opposite of worthless. Literally, you can't get further from worthless. It's not possible. As the highest concept of God. Also, so important that its image, not even the real thing, a false image of it. A false image of it that says the very opposite of the truth is so powerful it will control the lives of almost all people. And will be the biggest hurdle for us to overcome in our lives. I think, as we read earlier, having a force stronger even than enlightenment experiences, which can diminish the impact of a pathologos for a while, doesn't solve the problem. Therefore, freeing ourselves from the false image of the self is so significant that it's the most important puzzle we can solve, the most important thing we could do here, as we read last time. Therefore, what does that say about the significance of our soul's yearning or motivation or desire for knowing the true nature of the self? that its image can be the most powerful force. Not even a good image, the exact opposite. An image with giving the exact opposite to the truth of the ultimate nobility of yourself, that you are worthless. Another reason why guilt and blame can't ever work as a game. It's inconsistent with actual learning. Learning is discovering the truth of the nobility of the self and wondering about its intrinsic connection with the logos that extends its natural intelligence and goodness to us in all possible ways. As we read at the beginning of the chapter, it is entirely possible to verify for oneself that we are yada yada. You all know it by now, I hope. I know who I said that to. So within that framework, it is impossible to assert a natural worthlessness or wrongness or sinful nature of the self, which is required for the next step where the person believes it for some reason, so taking on the appearance of a knower. Not a true knower, because that's not a knowing thing, it's not a true thing to say, considering the true knowing is knowing the the ultimate nature of the self. So to put on an image of a knower to say something inconsistent with everything involved in the process of learning as well as the goal of learning. Doesn't fit. So I'm adding another paragraph where again we talk about guilt and blame and what we should do about it. Make that case and put it in there as well. So, the fear of having to admit they were wrong within the other system is, in some way carries with it a heavy burden of guilt and a sense of worthlessness. Not ultimate nobility and God nature of self, but the worthlessness sense of self. But even these families have learnt something. What? They have been invited to review the way they have cared for those in their charge. They know that in being asked to be accountable for their actions, a new era has begun, a new age. The age of the airbender, or the age of the, I don't know, new Hokage. I'm trying to make philosophy more accessible to everyone. Everyone can play. The new era. Even if you didn't overcome the boss bad guy, the simple fact that you tried and you took him on and you showed that his armor was not invincible. You brought in a new age, the age of the pirates, or the age of whatever fantasy series you're into or anime series you're into. We have done a similar thing, even with those who oppose because the significance and weight of the old blame game and the resulting heavy burden of guilt and sense of worthlessness. Because of that, they can't take the invitation and will be the ones threatening exile and becoming hostile. But even they have recognized that their image as an unquestioned authority has been pierced. It ain't a supernatural holy armor we wear when we put on our pathologos masks. The image as an unquestioned authority has been pierced, and with that change, things can never return to their former mode of being. Wow. Yes, we'll take it. We'll take it. But we'll also clap. Next section. The pathologos defended and condemned. Alright. Howdy. I just took a break to top up my coffee for the next exciting session. Pathologos defended and condemned? Why? Why would we defend the pathologos? 7th. This struggle, let's get my highlighter out first. There we go. There we go. The struggle that goes on within us is ancient. Whatever form the struggle takes, it is always between individual freedom and imposed social restraints and controls. Whatever form the struggle takes, it is always between the individual freedom and imposed social restraints and controls. Okay? Within the family clan, it is as if the right of parents, here we go, to impose a state of mind on their children derives from the presumed right of a king to make people in his royal domain passive, obedient subjects, or that of priests who impose on their congregations ways of behaving and believing. For in scenes that generate the pathologos, we see how parents assume king-priest roles. We're in a giant role-playing game, and our parents, much to our dismay and the negative consequence on the development of our character in-game, because our parents took on the role of king-priest. Too OP a role. I've been saying from the start, we shouldn't allow parents to take on the position of king priest because they can function in a way that will get a child to believe some negative conclusion about themselves that'll be the cause of their problems throughout their entire life, and can be identified as the kind of zombie virus that infects their soul. Too OP. You shouldn't have that role on the game. How about nurse/mother? Although, is that too limiting? You're only a mother when you're nursing someone? Anyway, the parents assume the king priest roles, making their sons or daughters conform to the family commandments. What? So the commandments for the priest, family commandments, and ways of believing. Boo. I said boo. We'll boo that. We don't like that. When family members accept this condition, and comply with its terms, a relationship is established and a bond is forged. Only it's a kind of it's a kind of evil forging in the fiery pits of Mordor, the volcano of Mordor. That's the kind of bond that is forged in accepting the condition and complying with the terms of the pathologos relationship. Hey, welcome Space Shuttle 40. Welcome to the chat. You ask, Hey, what's a philosophical counseling? What makes it different to normal counseling? Ooh, good question. What would you say, Nitro? Or anybody from the chat? However much you've seen of our midwifery stream, what would be a distinguishing feature to this kind of way of understanding human problems compared to other forms of counseling you may have heard about or had an experience of? It's a good question. Thanks for sharing your question. For that we have confetti. We're all about giving birth to questions and carrying questions. To carry a question is to be on a quest. But of course, philosophy isn't a solo quest, so we share our questions with our friends who can share the curiosity and wonder about, well, something that's beyond the personal. What is the self? What is the difference between regular counseling and philosophical counseling? So we can be party members in our quest to do what? Well, free ourselves from this. When family members accept the condition of the king-priest role, you're born into a family and you're picking characters for the role-playing game of the evening, only it's not an evening, it's your whole life. And your parents say, oh, I want to be a king-priest. And you say, okay, you can be a king-priest. I'll go along with that. I'll comply with its terms. And I'll establish a relationship and forge a bond. That's the problem. That shouldn't have happened. Let's keep going. The unspoken belief is a wordless agreement that once learned remains in force until it is refuted. We are looking then to refute it. Within each family clan, the system that establishes the rationale for its patterns of conformity is the individual pathologos. What's the individual pathologos that we are on a hunt for so that we can refute and free ourselves from? A system that establishes a rationale for patterns of conformity. A system that establishes a rationale of its patterns of conformity. A system. Do we have anything on the board? I think we had, yeah, this is early on. A system. Network of meshing gears, patterns, problems linking together into a unity. Which within each family clan, the system that establishes the rationale for its patterns of conformity, the way it conforms and what it conforms to, that's their individual pathologos. Okay. I'll have some coffee to that. And as long as it is unexamined, boo. As long as it is unexamined, its power remains secure. And its nature remains unknown. Within each family clan, the system that establishes the rationale for its patterns of conformity That is the individual pathologos. And so long as it is unexamined, its power remains secure, boo for that, and its nature remains unknown. Another boo for that. And its form remains invisible to the believer. Power is secure, nature is unknown, form is invisible. Yet as powerful as its grip, it's got a powerful grip, seems to be, to the degree that the proper words define the pathologos, it not only becomes visible, but it loses much of its power and mystery. Well, okay. I built that up. I did press a lot of different sound drop buttons. I was expecting it to hit a little harder than that. I was not expecting this word here much. So let's change it. Let's say it the way that I was hoping. As powerful as its grip seems to be, to the degree that the proper words we have learned in our life, in this reflection, in this reading, in our reflection with ourselves, with each other, in the Discord, however we do it. As a result of this kind of learning, we're able to use the proper words to define the pathologos. And to the degree we can do that, is the degree that not only our pathologos becomes visible, but its power and mystery will be completely decimated. No, diminished, removed, gone forever. I don't know. Pick a word there. Point is, it didn't say that. It said loses much of its power and mystery. How about loses all of its power and mystery? Let's start an internet campaign. Let's start a Reddit flame war with the, I don't know, we'll pick someone to be mad at about this, that it says it loses much of its power and not all of its power. Simply stated, whenever we are unjust to a child while giving the appearance, whenever we are unjust to a child while giving the appearance of being justified, we are committing an injustice. Well, does that mean you can be unjust to a child and have be dressed up as Gargamel or Cruella de Vil, and because they know that you are unjust, you can just punt a child, you just run up and kick them across Disneyland, dressed as Bowser? No. Who's Mickey Mouse's enemy? Who's his nemesis? I mean, every other Disney movie has one. I should be able to think of some. Let's keep reading. So whenever we are being unjust to a child while giving the appearance of being justified, we are committing an injustice. Maybe a certain kind. And the pathologos is nothing other than the consequence. Here we go. The pathologos, this is what we want to understand, is nothing other than the consequence of the child believing that those unjust acts directed at them were actually justified. Pathologos is nothing other than the consequence of the child believing that those unjust acts directed at them were justified. We act as if those false beliefs were justified while we remain ignorant of their source and blind to their influence on our life. The understanding of the pathologos. Come on, let's do another big build up and let's hope it hits harder. The understanding of the pathologos in its particularity as well as its generality brings its dissolution. There we go, my friends. This is what we were after. This was what the whole thing was all about. Wow. Make sure we give lots of claps for that ending. Yes. More. That's what we were after. There we go. All of the sound drops. Why is that important? Because up until this sentence, no one seems to be learning or growing or solving actual problems. Is that what he said? This is what it is. How do we end the problem? How do we bring a dissolution to the pathologos? The understanding of the pathologos in two ways: its particularity and its generality. What does that mean? Yes, you have to know about your particular pathologos. What's particular pathologos? We had it just a few moments ago. The specific specific system that establishes the rationale for the patterns of conformity within the family clan. So say that again. The specific system. This system establishes the reasoning, the internal rational structure for all of the different patterns involved in the kind of conformity demanded by this way of thinking. That's the individual pathologos. We just read you, to the degree the proper words define the pathologos, it becomes visible and it loses much of its power and mystery. We were hoping for the big reveal, lose all of its power and mystery, but it wasn't. So I'm guessing this must be one of the two ways we need to understand the pathologos to become free and do what we're here to do. Maybe correctly defining your specific pathologos is the pathologos in its particularity and as well as its generality. Both are needed to bring its dissolution. So we put two colors on the word dissolution. So maybe this proper words on your specific pathologos has to happen along with whatever is involved in understanding pathologos generally. What does that mean? Well, if you have an understanding of the principles that you've gone through, in order to find out the particularities of your pathologos, you do midwifery. There is a midwife that walks you through or guides you through using their art as best they can. Guides you through the questions to discover the origin scene and address it in a way that can bring forth a new kind of understanding and a new kind of recognition of yourself and your problems that you can test out for yourself in the ways we've been talking about. And if you do so, you can end the loop, return from the cycle, return home, complete the journey, become a Jedi, or free yourself from the... Well, hang on. Well, this is where we are. what we're reading here is going through that process itself to those kinds of conclusions and all the other things that follow in order to become free of your personal pathologos isn't enough. If you also have to understand the pathologos in general, you are learning the principles, causes, systems. You are learning the system that establishes the rationale for the patterns of conformity to the self-logos. And its reflection into the pathologos that's the cause of your personal problem. And the one who has an understanding of the paradigm or model, including an ideal that can be used to benefit others, that's what we call an art. So what do we get from that? Well, it sounds like this conclusion here is if you truly want to be free of the pathologos, you have to not just understand the specifics of your problem, but understand what you just went through. Understand the thing that helped you in the most out of anything. The thing most worth doing. You have to understand, it seems like what it says here, the generality of pathologos itself. So also therefore become someone with the art of philosophical midwifery. Why would that be necessary? Or how does it relate to the idea of the mean in the symposium? And the significance of Socrates being a teacher to Glaucon, Agathon? The same way Diotima was a teacher to him. Is there a significance of playing a role in the maintaining of a tradition necessary for us to become free of the problem? Interesting to know for all those who actually want to be free and bring the dissolution of their problem. That is, hey, at the end of it, maybe there's a necessity of turning around like we do at the end of a dialectic, like we do at the end of a dream analysis session, turn back around to the start again, like we do, within the dialectic, within our reading, go back to the beginning, read the whole section again. Reflect on the process you've just went through as a whole. And understand that. Is there a necessity of doing that for you to even become free of your own problems? So anyone who gains an insight into their pathologos without, I suppose, graduating or functioning as, practicing as best they can, the art of midwifery might not be completely free of their pathologos. However, we can still say it will have lost much of its power and mystery, maybe, by defining this, using proper words to define the specific pathologos. So there's an interesting hidden puzzle or interesting, quest, directive, so this was a small section, pathologos defended and condemned. There's an ancient struggle going on within us between our individual freedom and the imposed social constraints and controls, but specifically of the family clan, because our folks decide to roleplay a OP character of the priest king and insist that the daughters and sons conform to their family commandments and their family laws, like a priest or a king would demand and way of believing. Because of that, when family members and us, when we were too young to know better, accept this condition, comply with the terms, forge a relationship in the sinister pits of the volcano at Mordor. We forge a bond in buying into this pretext, this fantasy, this roleplay. Masks, charades, you name it. The unspoken belief is a wordless agreement. I will believe this about myself, don't you worry. That once learned remains in force until it is refuted. We're here to refute it. Within each family clan, the system that establishes the rationale for the patterns of conformity is our individual pathologos, and so long as it is unexamined, its power remains secure. 1. Its nature remains unknown. 2. And its form remains invisible to we the believer. Yet, as powerful as its grip seems to be, to the degree that we use the proper words to define the pathologos, so we better be learning how to define things. It is not only does it become visible, but it loses much of its power and mystery. Not happy with it just losing much of its power and mystery. Easy, obvious to see, recognize it, not mysterious anymore, less believable now. There goes its power. Not happy with just that. You want to remove the whole enchilada. You want to be free. You want to be the self. You want to reach your destiny. You want to be free to reach your highest destiny. Let's keep going. Whenever we are unjust to a child while giving the appearance of justice, we are committing a certain kind of special injustice. And the pathologos is nothing other than the consequence of the child believing that those unjust acts directed at them were justified. They weren't. They believe it. The pathologos is the consequence of believing the charade we put on when we act unjustly to a child while giving the appearance of justice. We act as if those false beliefs were justified while remaining ignorant of their source. Well, we know that because we wouldn't be insisting on it or stuck in this game if we sufficiently understood and defined its source. So we're still ignorant of it if we're still insisting on it. So we act as if those false beliefs were justified while remaining ignorant of their source and blind to their influence on their life. Their source was somebody actually did an injustice, as we described, and tried to pretend it was justified. And because we remain ignorant that that's the source of our fundamental belief about ourselves that creates fear, guilt, insecurity, inadequacy, things that limit us, because we don't know that that's the source of this terrible false belief we believe, we continue to believe it. Its power remains secure, its nature remains unknown, and its form remains invisible till we start defining it. The understanding of the pathologos, both in its particularity and the pathologos in its generality, is what brings its dissolution. That was the word I was looking for before. Dissolution. Understand your pathologos, understand the pathologos, and you laugh it. And take that laughter and good humor and please connect with others on this channel in the Discord, in the comment section, and share this art that you have developed in freeing yourself from your problem. Share it with us. Help us get there too. That would be neat. Okay, that's the end of section 7, so I guess we'll call that a day for today. Next time, inner dialogues and dreams. Oh, this is a big one. Of course, big bombshell. We now know what it takes for us to dissolve our pathologos, to fully close the loop and end the problem. And we have been reflecting on whether it should be the activity we are focused on at all times, or at least alongside our quest to know the Logos, to know reality as Usia, and to know the self. The quest of philosophy. Either along with that or primarily, the most important thing we can do is discover and free ourselves from the path of Logos, bring its dissolution. Given that, we should be able, we have a strong case for a singular focus that we can direct every aspect of our soul, every aspect of our energy, our planning, our focus, our desire, any virtues we've been developing, we can focus it on this singular activity. That's easier said than done. What about the fact that most of the time we don't pick the thoughts that come up? And those thoughts are usually reflections of our path of Logos to get in our way in some way. Put us back into that state of mind, especially when we're trying our best. Because you need to be your best. What's your best? This way of being. That diminishes your capacity to share in the Logos. What about those times we can't be singularly focused on our goal when that crap comes up? But also, what about when we're asleep? How can we be singularly focused on our goal when we're dreaming? In other words, how does what we have discovered fit in with inner dialogue and dreams, such that perhaps we can go back to the start and recognize this, that it is entirely possible to verify for ourselves, for oneself, that we are part of a caring and intelligible universe. The verification is a kind of proof, since it is a way of understanding that is based upon the realization that our mind constantly communicates with us. And for our benefit, we know more about what our benefit is, having read so far through this chapter. The communications from the mind are as profound as they are utterly appropriate to our circumstances. While the scope of the mind is pervasive, its precision is always directed to what's personally significant. So there's our two scopes. What's personally significant and what's all pervasive. What's your personal pathologos and what's the nature of the pathologos itself? Why even have this? So we are engaged in a kind of likeness to the scope of the mind, which is all pervasive, but also amazingly precise. We will demonstrate that our choice of goals, there we go, we've chosen a goal to be singularly focused on, at least for a while, considering the arguments we've been reading. The problems we face as we try and hold on to that singular focus. The daydreams or fantasies that come up even though we're trying to keep our focus. And the dreams that visit us in our sleep. There you go. Each and every one of them are like doorways into the richest source of insights into our lives. Wow. So even when these things come up, they can still be an aspect of our singular focus. Recognizing, having insights into the nature of our problem, and perhaps dreams and random fantasies and thoughts don't just point to our problem, but maybe offer us clues to solve it. What we discover through these insights is that the mind itself provides ample evidence of its own goodness and integrity. I miffed it. Goodness and intelligibility. Its understandability and knowability, its rationality, having all the pieces fit together. It's precise, everything fits perfectly. Each moment perfectly follows the other, but every moment follows the other, expressing a communication that is benefiting or bestowing goodness through this understanding of the intelligibility. What's that called? Learning the language of the logos, or mastering the art of the self logos. What we do here, what we're reading. It's through that logos that this thing that fits, this thing that is intelligible, that thing that can be understood within a framework of the rationality of systems of conformity to true pattern, that's being used to convey goodness or some sort of supra-divine providence or benefit. You'd say supra-divine. I say supra-divine because we notice two qualities, or we are coming to discover for ourselves two qualities. The fact that everything fits, the fact that there is an understandable pattern. That is what we learn to master in both midwifery and philosophy, the art of the dialectic, the art of the self-logos. And of course that has a source. It's not something we just made up or invented. It's something that eternally exists, and therefore all rational beings evolving through the process of evolution will come to this point that we are at, where we have the ability to participate or share in logos, and we have the ability to reflect on ourselves, ousia. That's sufficient. To reflect on and understand that intelligibility. To know the nature of mind and ourselves. And in this activity, including of course freeing ourselves from the false idea of mind and the false image of the self that cause our problems. Gonna do that. We discover this kind of intelligence that's all pervasive yet all very precise, and is using itself to communicate a goodness. In other words, whatever the whole of intelligence is, mind itself, ousia, the second hypothesis. This is why we have to be reading philosophy as we do midwifery. The entirety of intelligibility itself, which may have self-logos running all the way through it. Self-logos may be the highest aspect of it if it's the pattern for even intelligibility. Nevertheless, it's being used to bestow a benefit. This grand intelligence, self knowing itself as ousia, or through ousia. Knowledge, nous, the brilliant light of being. The entirety of that is being used by something in some direction for some reason. And the reason is, well, the direction is goodness. The consequence is benefit. The end we are here to discover and reach. In fact, reaching that end would be the end point of benefit. If we're being guided towards our highest goal, knowing what that is and achieving it, and recognizing why it's our highest goal, and maybe also recognizing the process we went through to become awake to it, that would be our highest goal. That must be what is directing us towards. So what? So what is it that's using that intelligence in such a profound and caring way that we give it the special word providence? Where does providence live? Who's using reality in this way? Why? And how does answering that question relate to our other question in midwifery? What is the unsuspected false image of the self that we came to a conclusion in about without words, a wordless conclusion that served as a kind of bond. Come on, scrolling. There we go. Oops. Okay. Oh no, everything has gone to custard. Whoops. No. All right. Okay. So, quest to know the origin of that which we come to discover. The promise at the beginning of chapter 1 is that we will verify for ourselves we live in a profoundly intelligible and caring universe. That is, care is all pervasive and directed amazingly precisely. If we become aware of that, which is the promise, and may involve going through these steps that we are learning, what do we do with it? And do we wonder about its cause? The cause of this divine intelligence and care, this divine intelligibility and providence. The very activity we have been using and mastering in order to free ourselves from our own problems. Using the self-logos and the dialectic to reflect on the cause of what's most important. Do we take that way of being with us to our experience of this divine intelligible goodness? Allowing us to ask the question, what's the origin of this? And what's experiencing it? I already know that I can come to a false image of myself or a false self-identity as a result of things that appear really good and knowing and caring, because I had to go through all that stuff to recognize that is the essence of what binds the pathologos to our soul, the image of these things. And the consequent, the wordless agreement of that unspoken false belief about myself. So, and given all of that, if I'm now encountering, and through this verification for myself, through this process, if I am verifying this divine rationality and providence, not the image of goodness and knowingness and care, but the actual thing itself, am I going to be wary to come away with a false conclusion about it? Am I going to ask, what is my role? What is myself? And I better not walk away with a false conclusion that this is myself if it's not the self. But the self is that which is experiencing it, maybe. Or another question that we've learned to ask all the time so far. What's the cause of this? What are the root causes? What's the cause even of this divine providential intelligence? That's all pervasive and amazingly precise. And does that make a difference? Lots to wonder about. Thanks. I hope you join me next time, where we will get into the next section. We will ask the question, well, hang on a second, the random thoughts and our nighttime random thoughts, how do they fit into the picture? Can we really go for this 100% with excellence? Bang this out as quickly as possible, become free as quickly as possible. good question. I will return next time with you and with that question, I hope. And we will wonder about it together as we continue our quest. The quest, the noblest game in town, the only game in town, the game to know thyself. Oh, and unshackle yourself from a wordless false belief about yourself that was a kind of bond forged in fiery evil by being accepting of the charade. Until, of course, you use the right words to define the nature of your pathologos, which involves recognizing the kind of rationality, the system, the system that establishes the rationale for the patterns of conformity, once you've seen that, and the principles of the midwifery itself, you're free. So, as we race towards that goal as well, I hope you're having fun, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me.